Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the HIPAA Insider Show. My name's Adam and I'm joined always by the CTO and founder of HIPAA Vault, Gil Vidals. Hey Gil, thanks for joining me again today.
Hey, welcome to, we're recording this on a Friday, so welcome to Friday, Adam.
Happy Friday to you, Gil, and happy Friday to all of our listeners and viewers. Today we're talking about a topic that keeps practice managers and healthcare executives up at night. HIPAA fines. We see huge multi-million-dollar headlines, and it's easy to think that they only apply to, the big hospital networks. But the lessons that we can learn from these cases are pretty much universal, right, Gil?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've talked about so many compromises and fines that they kind of fall into different buckets, and the details are different, obviously, but they're all kind of grouped together. And yeah, this is a pretty interesting one. I do like to review this because it's good to keep these things in mind, like what went wrong, how can we improve, could we have done better?
Yeah, in our earlier episodes, we also had a section called Breach of the Week, which, if you stay tuned, that might be coming back. I'm not sure, but this one is a deep dive into a HIPAA fine. So let's get specific. Gil, you wanted to talk about a particular case, right, that highlights a common occurrence, but a devastatingly costly mistake.
Yeah, it's unfortunate in this specific one because the solution that could have prevented this is pretty straightforward and not costly, by the way. But what we're talking about is the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research. And that's part of the North Shore LIJ health system. So back in 2016, they agreed to settle for $3.9 million with the Health and Human Services. So
wow,
it's a lot.
3.9 million. Yeah, that is a lot. And it doesn't sound like they're a huge institution. I think they're a not-for-profit. What happened? Was it a massive cyber attack by a foreign entity or a huge server breach?
No, it was nothing like that. It was a very simple problem. What happened was that there was a laptop that was stolen from an employee's car. And so that's a simple background.
Just a single laptop.
Yeah, just a single laptop. And the fundamental issue was that laptop was not encrypted, meaning anyone that could pull the drive out, connect it to a USB port or a device that can connect that drive from that laptop to another computer. You could just click on it. I mean, even an amateur could do it and just look at all the data. So there was no protection for that data.
What was on the laptop?
So what they discovered that was on the laptop was about 13,000 patient records, and that included the personal identifiable information, meaning the names of the people, date of birth, and what made it HIPAA was because there was health information records as well, including the diagnosis of each patient, and there was other sensitive data as well.
Mm-hmm. So the fine wasn't just that for the fact that it was stolen. It was for the state of the data on the laptop. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the laptop really is of no consequence. It's the data that was on there. And the organization had already identified that these laptops that these employees were carrying with them were unencrypted, and they had a policy that said, hey, you have to encrypt all of that. But they hadn't implemented the policy, which is really sad. And this is an important point. The paper that organizations have, healthcare organizations have paper, I call it paper policies, right? Policies, but it's not worth much more than just the paper they're written on if they don't implement it. So in this case, they had a policy, but it didn't protect them because they didn't enforce that policy.
Yeah, and this is public record, by the way, HHS.gov press release if you want to, if you're listening or viewing and want to check it out from September 2016. While we're pausing for a second, if you like what you're listening to, if you like what we do, give us a subscribe, a like on the video if you're on YouTube, leave us a review, comment. It's really appreciated. Okay, so that's the core of our show today, and we have an almost $4 million problem that's stemming from data being stored insecurely on a local laptop. How does this story change? How's there a better story, if you like, if they had partnered with a HIPAA compliant provider like HIPAA Vault?
Well, that's an interesting question. Like if you could go back in time,
Yeah.
If they were working with a cloud provider like HIPAA Vault, then that data, we'd assume, would have stayed in the cloud. You wouldn't need employees taking this data onto a laptop and processing it and leaving it on the laptop. You would assume, like many of our customers we have, they're processing the data in the cloud, and that's where it remains. So that's a good way to look at it, right? Where is the data? Where are you keeping it? Is it centralized? Is it decentralized? Who has access? So yeah, that's one way to look at it, Adam. If you had a different model, even if it is centralized but in the cloud with their security, and you don't let employees download that data, then that would have been a lot better.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's not enough to just say, maybe some of our listeners are using, let's say, an EMR or an EHR, and they say, well, I do my work in the EMR, EHR, it's cloud-based, it's HIPAA compliant, I'm good to go. They've always also got to think about, well, are you doing any additional data processing that, for example, are you at some point needing to download an XML or an Excel sheet from the EMR in order to process the data a little bit more? Are you needing to work on that? And that could be an area of risk, right? Like, which could be solved by maybe using a cloud-based Excel or Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel in the cloud, versus manipulating the data on your local machine, or having a virtual machine that's cloud-based to be able to do that work as well.
I think that's a good point. I mean, I think there's a couple of lessons to learn from here. The most obvious lesson is, well, all the equipment should be encrypted, all the laptops. Why does that matter? Because if a laptop is stolen, like what happened in this case, then the encryption passphrase or key, depending on how you decrypt the data, but either way, that the thief wouldn't have been able to do anything with the data. In fact, you wouldn't even need to report it, because if you think about it, the data is all scrambled. It's not really patient information. It's scrambled, nonsensical strings of characters, right? It's not really patient information. The only way it becomes patient information is if somebody has the passphrase or the key, which the thief wouldn't have, right?
Yeah.
So that's one lesson. The other lesson is, you really shouldn't be letting employees put sensitive data on their laptop. They shouldn't be downloading it, using it there. That's really not a good idea. So I think your point is well taken, Adam, that if you have it centralized in the cloud where it stays there and is secure, that's probably a good way to go about it.
Yeah. So in that case, if the laptop's stolen, it's a simpler process, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, what about the risk analysis failure that the OCR pointed out?
I think that's probably pretty important too. If you're going to have a real, true HIPAA compliant environment, again, not just paper policies that you don't implement, but a real policy, you need to have a good foundation. And part of that foundation is having expert safeguards that are built in. That includes encryption at rest, which is an encrypted laptop. When it's powered off, everything's encrypted. And encrypted in transit. That is, if you are going to move patient data from point A to point B, you want to have it encrypted in transit. And you want to have robust access controls, meaning who has the right to access this data to begin with. You shouldn't have it to where everybody in the company can access the data. You do least privileges. So that means you only allow the people that really need access to have it. Everybody else doesn't get it. And then you have to have some auditing and monitoring to make sure that if there's suspicious activity, that could be identified. So you can keep these things in mind when you're building your own healthcare application, that you have and you inherit these security controls. You want to use these kind of controls. So this will ensure that you're HIPAA compliant and that you can sleep at night.
Yeah, and what about the legal components? There's the business associate agreement, or BAA, as well, right?
Yes, that's true. It's that business associate agreement is important. In this case, the Feinstein Institute couldn't prove that they had a system-wide, organization-wide plan.
Good.
And the BAA with a hosting partner is a cornerstone of that proof. So you want to, whoever you're dealing with in your world, your partners, just check to make sure you have a BAA with all your partners that touch the physical data, even if they don't open the data. So in other words, if it's being processed and you pass the data from vendor A to vendor B, and they say to you, well, I don't need a BA because I don't open this data, I don't look at it. Well, it doesn't matter. As long as they have any access to the files, even if they choose not to look at them, that's not enough for you to say, oh, that's fine, you don't need a BA. No, you still need a BAA. So keep that in mind as well.
Good. Okay. So coming to the end here, but for a small practice or healthcare startup listener, make sure, so the lesson is not just encrypt your laptops and you'll be fine, right?
Yeah, no, the lesson's bigger. It's fundamentally to rethink where your data lives. Like where is your data, and where does it go? Does it travel from point A to point B? You have to be aware of that. Maybe you can draw that in a diagram. Say, well, this is how the data comes in. This is where it sleeps. This is where it lives. And when you draw that picture, that might be an eye opener where you start realizing, oh, we may have a problem here. So yeah, think about where the data lives. And I think that'll help a lot in visualizing what needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it could be as simple for a startup practice. It might just be the data's in an Excel sheet, and where's that Excel sheet located? Could it be located in a more secure place? So, okay, what's the actionable advice here then to sum up, Gil? I think
I think first off, don't store your data in devices, on local devices if you can help it, like a laptop, mobile phone. Don't do that. If you are going to do it, then encrypt it, and your data and applications. Make sure if they have to move from point A to point B, make sure it's secure. Consider HIPAA compliant cloud environment, and then third, ensure you have the right legal documents, a business associate agreement with all your partners and vendors. And so those three things will help. One thing that we didn't mention about this fine is 3.9 million. If you take 3.9 million divided by 13,000 patient records, that's $300 per patient, which is about what we see. $250 to $400 per patient is the fine, because that helps pay for the identity theft management, where you can get essentially a subscription for each patient whose data was stolen, so that they can have a cloud provider that will monitor their identity to see if anyone's using their identity inappropriately. So you have to pay for that, and that's expensive, right? Especially times 13,000. That costs a lot. You have to do it for 2 years. So for 1 year, the fine would have been for 2 million, but because you have to do this monitoring for 2 years, it's double 2, so that's about $4 million. So quite expensive.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome insight, Gail. You've taken a $4 million disaster and shown us a clear path towards avoiding it. So thank you for that. And that's all we have time for today. Do like, share, subscribe. And until next time, thanks for stopping by.